Yes. So with this place, the jury was introduced or legitimized? Was there a jury before?
Yes. The question is, did Aeschylus introduce jury system? No, he provided the rationale, the foundation, philosophical foundation, religious foundation. You see, Greeks were making religion as they went. It was not something fixed. We shall see later on with Plato and his myth-making. He's amazing. He could describe any kind of religious truth by just making it up. Right? Of course, there was this remarkable thing that what they made up was actually true. That is, this is the difference between them and us. You have to be very careful. You have to be a great genius. When you're certain you're a great genius, you could try. Yes.
So you mentioned in the beginning that the epic poetry, the kind of form of civilization starts with Homer. What about the Gilgamesh, for example, that was written before Homer?
Yes, it was, and it was nicely buried and covered with dirt till the end of 19th century. I talk about it in the first lecture. I'm talking about civilization as it is. Western civilization never knew of Gilgamesh till, 1888, when it was discovered. Yes, there were other civilizations. Of course, civilizations of the Near East existed. Hittites existed. Assyrians, Babylonians, after all, Egypt, which goes on. Right? But the text on which our civilization is effectively based is Homer, because people have been, again, I talked about that, but do not hesitate, you can ask any question. Yes?
So, getting back to the juries, there's this question about authority. So, you know, is the authority, where is the authority coming from here? Is Athena, because she's a goddess and she instantiates the jury, is the jury then legitimized because the authority's coming from the goddess?
That's a very profound question. I would rather answer it in about 3 or 4 lectures. But yes, Greeks, okay, let me answer in a less profound way. Greeks were certain that there was a divine order. And if you break the law, gods will get you. You didn't know how. We will be talking about it time and time and time again. But there was they were certain that justice existed, that it was a strong force. And even if you think you escaped, there is no escape. That was something on which Greeks agreed. Yes?
Why did the Furies not show up sooner? I mean, we have this whole trail of dead bodies going back.
That's a good question. That's a very good question. And let me tell you, the question is, why didn't they show up later? After all, they could have showed up 10 years prior or even before, when you decide to cook children, they should jump in. Believe it or not, you're not the first person who asks this question. Guess who is the first?
The next playwright.
It's much closer. Orestes, right there in the play. That's right. It's right here. So how come you're after me? You were not after her. And they said, well, she was not a relative of her husband. She was not a blood relative. They're always blood relatives. They sort of throw it back and forth. Sort of the Furies say, well, husband and wife, they're not blood relatives, which is true. And to which Apollo says, but that violates the basic block of society, the family, and things like that. Yes, the arguments are right there. And what Aeschylus shows that, yeah, they are valid arguments. But we have to come to a resolution. And the resolution, which he shows, is not by figuring out, obviously they're all wrong. That's there is no possible way to name and say, no, I mean, Clytemnestra is really a nice woman. Right? And I missed a whole bunch, when she kills, I had to miss, when she kills Agamemnon, she has this beautiful bathrobe, like a net. And what she does, she says, oh, dear husband, and wraps him in this robe, like that. And then she gets the sword and kills him. And this robe plays a role in this, all three things. I mean, yes, the stuff is as nasty as it comes. There is nothing, it's not shown. They have good taste. They don't show blood on stage. That's for Hollywood. Greeks would not, I mean, they were not prudes, but they just knew this is a very major thing to kill somebody. You don't want to really do that. Yes?
I think it's, going back to the topic of civilization, I think that the point that you're building on here is that one of the cornerstones of civilization is an end to vengeance. The tribes, family tribes that have blood bonds with each other and have to coexist in a city format, have to find ways to end the violence between them, and that when that violence occurs at the highest levels, where you can no longer seek justice from the rulers, that this idea of a jury, that you're tried by your peers as opposed to having this kind of absolute justice come down from on high, is the thing that bound.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. You answered your question. Yes, it is correct. Yes. You're elaborating. No. Yeah. This is good. You could do what he does. You could just say things. They don't have to be questioned. No, it's very good.
Well, I expect, if others have challenges to that concept.
Yes, but it's literally, but that's the foundational text for it. That's what I'm trying. Because if you go to Homer, it's still, he kills my friend, I'll kill him. And then I'll get killed. It's still this infinite chain of, and after all, he steals my wife. Okay, I'll go and wipe his city and kill all his relatives. That's Hermetic justice.
The thing that I was thinking about was this plea that, we're not actually blood related, and therefore this crime is less heinous because this cycle of
Yes.
vengeance isn't justified in some way.
But it's not, again, we're getting to the point where every murder brings you in front of the jury of Areopagus, this highest jury in Athens. And in some sense, Athens is the world. The goddess is not just talking to this little village in Attica. She's talking to all of us, as Greeks understood. After all, Aeschylus takes his plays to other locations. They are performed. And again, it's very, very Athenian in a sense. He does adjust it to political situation. Remember, he moves the action to Argos from Mycenae for no particular reason. And then there is a speech at the end of the Furies about eternal friendship between Argos and Athens. Welcome. Well, they're going to fight Spartans next week, so that's propaganda. So this is this amazing thing. There is propaganda there. It's all very of the moment, but there is a very deep truth and profound thought at the same time. This is something quite wonderful about the Greeks. They're not talking generalities. They could talk this specific story, make it eternal, and then apply it at the same time to political events of the day, as they did. Yes?
So I'm curious to talk more about this notion of accounting of sin. So there's this, there's no, like this, it can be on you, you can do things to remove it, you can atone for it, and something that appears, I guess there's, obviously in the Jewish and later Christian civilizations as well. And also even there's karma in some sense. It seems like there's a very resonant concept that that wrongdoing is almost like a physical thing that can be on you and not. I wonder if you could just talk more about that. Is there a notion of one direction versus the other?
What's the other direction?
Well,
The other direction is do what you please, doesn't matter, as long as you get away with it.
You see, I guess it's something you see in multiple civilizations, and I don't know whether it's
Yes, there is a fundamental notion of justice, which is apparently, I would say, any civilization, any group of society has. We can destroy it. 20th century was extremely successful in replacing justice with Aryan justice or proletarian justice. That it happened. I'm not making it up. People said this is quote from Lenin. We do not believe in absolute morality and denounce every fable about such morality. This is from his speech to the first Congress of Komsomol, the Youth Communist League. So, there were people explicitly saying the morality as absolute morality does not exist. Of course, for Nazis, absolute morality, these are not people. You could deal with them as you please, and they did. So, we have to remember that it could be taken away. It could be taken suddenly by saying, well, they're not citizens. If they're not citizens, they could be just carted and, who knows, some terrible things. Or they could belong to some strange, wild, terrible religion such as Islam. These are the dangers now. But they are objective. So, nevertheless, the idea of universal absolute justice, I claim, is innate, in the sense it apparently appears, and whether it's innate, what it means, whether it's cultural, it's a very complicated question, which for sure I do not want to address right now. I'll be talking more about it. We'll be talking, don't forget, we will be talking specifically about justice. In a few lectures, I'll have to talk about Aristotelian ethics. And before, we will have to talk about Plato, who raised these issues. But first, I have to set the stage. So that we have to, and I'll have to show you that these wonderful Athenians who knew about justice were able to commit the most horrendous crimes against justice. Yes?
The greatest are the crimes of inevitability. And so Greeks seem to be masters of sort of putting the protagonist sort of between two opposing forces. So I'm wondering, could it have, could Aristotle simply have said no to Apollo and Zeus?
He has right to say no to both.
Could he? Yes, he could. Many people in sort of Greek plays, Greek stories did. For example, let me take this very story. Let us go back to Odyssey when Zeus tells us about this event, about assassination of Agamemnon. He says, we told Aegisthus not to kill Agamemnon. We sent Hermes, he says, to kill Agamemnon. And he didn't listen. This is just, the highest authorities, the Olympic god, Zeus himself, sent their top messenger to convince Aegisthus, this guy who, not to do it in so many words. Do not do it. And he does it. So no, you're not a slave to gods. You could do what you please. This is, by the way, it's a fact. Yes?
What about this idea that eye for an eye is a characteristic to the tribal society, and what you're talking about is a transition to a more urban setting?
Yes, urban means civilized. It's literally, that's what civilization means. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yes, I mean, getting civilized means to accepting some mechanisms.
Number of people, the composition and the relationship between, in the quote-unquote new realities of a city.
Yes, but it takes a while. And Greeks were the first ones who were able to create this. Because even much later, when we look at the legal code of Yaroslav the Wise, these are 1,000 years later, I mean, it still has sort of lex talionis.
By the way, do they have a code per se?
Who? Oh, they had laws. Yes, they had laws. But again, there was a wonderful rule. When you swore to do justice as a member of the jury, you said, I will follow the laws or do the just thing. Right? So,
Similar to follow your proletarian view of justice?
No. It's not what they meant. Whether they did what they said is another story. Yes, they had corrupt juries. Yes, they had bad rulers. But
well, I wanted to elaborate on, yes, this point. But when you look at this story, it's really amazing how he takes these characters and puts them literally between a rock and a hard place. He basically says, well, we've got these two forces that are very black and white. The gods see things as black and white. The Furies see things as black and white.
Furies are gods.
Well, yes, okay, yes. We've got two sides that see black and white, and they don't agree. And so how do we resolve this really gray situation where everything's wrong?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's...
Very good. Yes.
Yeah, and so, yeah, that's...
But they do resolve. They find a resolution. You say it's not a perfect compromise. Well, it is the best we have found as a species. I mean, appealing to the law, it's very, the law doesn't give us perfection. Even, I'm going to say a terrible thing, even the Supreme Court could be wrong. No, it cannot be wrong legally. There is this ancient axiom of English common law, the king can do no wrong. Did they really believe that king could do no wrong? Of course not. Of course they knew perfectly well that kings do wrong things. But the king can do no wrong. In some sense, legally speaking, the state can do no wrong. King is the state. Right? We have to, yes?
No, I just wanted to mention, it's not a question regarding to your, so the Greeks, until rather late in their history, they did not have written laws, okay, they had customs, okay. They started to codify the law when they started to establish the overseas colonies.
Which by the time of Aeschylus, they established lots of overseas colonies. But again, it's not it's not the law doesn't have to be written to be the law, by the way. So, when Solon gave laws to Athenians, again, a century before Aeschylus, he gave laws, they were laws. Before Draco, when he gave laws to the Athenians, terrible laws. This is why we say draconian law, because there was this guy, Draco, who came with draconian laws. Basically, chop off his head, was the rule. And then, so Athenians had, by that time, they had several sets of laws which they went through. But, again, they realized full well that laws were limited, again, but they were insisting, this is again, on this trial jury procedure. And one of the things which we will see in 3 lectures, is how terrible this procedure could be. Because once Athenians managed to put somebody who was the most just person ever on trial, and guess what? They killed him.
But what about ostracism, like the whole city will vote to...
They loved it in any case. That was almost like a death penalty. But they did it. Every important Athenian, pretty much, was ostracized. Miltiades out, Themistocles out. I could go through the list. The most just person in Athens was Aristides. Aristides the just. We wouldn't call it the just. So there is this amazing story about him, showing it's in Plutarch, about him justice. He goes to the assembly, and there is a guy who comes to him with an ostroka, a shard, and says, look, I'm illiterate. Could you please put a name, because I want to read the city of some guy? And he says, yeah, sure. And he says, Aristides. And Aristides writes, Aristides. I say, why did you say? Well, because everybody says Aristides, Aristides. We had enough of that. Sort of the fact that he had the reputation of being the most just ruler apparently was enough to expel him. Guess what? They did. You say, it's just a story. No, we have archaeological evidence. We have these shards with his name, which is pretty amazing. Shards from that survived. But sort of Athenians, look, it was a perfect democracy. They hated. Hello, guys. We have to change the sign to later. We have to do something. You are the sign person. Athenians were quite wonderful. It was a perfect democracy. Therefore, they hated their leaders. Good leaders. They would put everybody, they would Pericles, the most popular Athenian leader. He was on trial time and time again. He had to beg them to give citizenship to his children. He was humiliated time and time. It was a democracy. This is why many Athenians strongly preferred some other social system. We'll be talking about it in the next lecture. We'll be talking about Sparta. So, a typical educated Athenian believed that Sparta had a much better system. They had democracy up to here. So, it's a complicated, yes?
I just want to point out that the practice of jury being able to override the law, and the laws being very limited, and jury necessary to judge from outside the law system, it basically was carried over through the ages and exists now in U.S. perfectly fine, and it's called jury nullification. And,
yes.
And that's what jury does, or can do, and sometimes does.
Can do.
Brings up a verdict that is contrary to the current law.
Yes, they can do that. Yes, they can do that. It's a complicated, we will talk about it in greater details. For Greeks, there was they swore to follow the law. They actually did not have a choice. Just letting you know.
Law cannot maybe describe all and every single situation. So.
Yes, and they found different ways, but they always swore to follow the law. That was part of their oath. And otherwise,
does it then mean that this practice is contrary to the ancient Greek, the English?
Greeks had a very fine notion of the law, far finer. In a sense, for them, laws were divine. Yes, they knew they were humanly made. We'll be talking, when we talk about Plato, we'll be talking about this situation when Socrates is condemned. And the question is, everybody knows it's an unjust verdict. And then Socrates, okay, I'm telling you what I'll be telling you later. So, the Greeks had a very exalted notion of the law. Sort of part of our current discourse is that we don't have exalted notion of anything anymore. This is, I'm serious. We sort of, and it's not historically so. Obviously, the founding fathers had a very, very exalted notion of the law. But the present times, like we think that government is evil, we think that taxes are bad, we think, do I have to go through the list? I mean, everything. The only good thing is making money. And that's what Greeks did not believe. We had major.
But the Constitution still held the cornerstone. It's not.
Yes and no, because Constitution as a document, yes. Constitution as it lives in its living representatives, presidents and supreme justices, justices of Supreme Court and senators. You meet any person, however ignorant of politics or anything, and he is prepared. This is the problem which we're having right now. Everybody is prepared to say, well, they're all crooks. There is no respect left. What could I say? This is a major problem. It might lead to consequences. The thing that the state is good, we will be talking about it time and time and time in the course, is the foundation of any civilization. You have to believe. I don't mean that the state is right on every particular thing which it does. There's plentiful evidence against that. Nevertheless, the state is good. There is a good thing. Yes?
I want to go back to the theatre as an art of form and as a sort of unifying factor in Greek society.
Yes.
So you touched upon this, and I want to sort of, perhaps that served the Greeks very well to have that,
Did?
very theatrical performances, from city to city. Other cultures did not have that, so.
Ha! Okay, let's go through. Where do you want to start? Spain, with Lope de Vega and Calderon and their great theatrical tradition of the Gold Age. Okay, we move next door to France. Could you imagine France without Corneille, Racine, Molière? No, you cannot. Now let's jump across the channel. Could you talk about English-speaking civilization without mentioning the Bard, Shakespeare? We're all, and I could go on and on and on. When we get to Germany, yes, they come late. They were sort of late bloomers. But there is Goethe and Schiller and Kleist and von Hofmannsthal. Later on. They're all wonderful. Yes?
Jewish civilization does not have theater as a
Yes. Yes, but that is a point which I actually make. Judaism is a religion, not civilization. historically. Yes, yes, yes. Yes. But right now, sort of obviously, there were Jewish playwrights in Europe, very successful.
No, but I'm talking about ancient Judaism now.
But ancient Judaism is again, we will be talking about it to great detail, was in some sense, it was not on the main line of Greek things. And when Greeks tried to civilize Jews during time of, say, Judas Maccabeus, Jews said, oh, well, we don't want to be civilized. They really didn't want to be civilized. They didn't want to go to gymnasiums, which were built for them. Said, oh, please go exercise. Said, no, we will not exercise. We will not attend the plays. They were doing plays for them. And some Jews actually tried to follow. Yeah. But it didn't quite, it's a very good point. You know, I will be talking specifically. Look, so far there are no Jews. In a very simple way, till very late, Greeks are totally unaware of the Jews. They just do not know. Right? The classical Greek literature has no single quotation from the Bible except one. There is a mysterious book on Exalted, it's called. Nobody even knows who wrote it. And it has a quotation. There's one line in 1,000 volumes of Greek literature. There is one line. Jews are utterly ignored till certain time, but we'll get to that time when Jews suddenly appear. But it's, we will have to talk about the Jews because they do appear in a major way. They cannot be ignored. They still cannot be ignored. But even today, I mean, this is one nation which wouldn't be ignored. Right? So, yes, we will talk about it, but right now, in this, for Aeschylus, there are no Jews. Literally, he has no image, he doesn't know. Of course, later on, especially during the time when some Jews attempt to reconcile Judaism with Greek civilization, people like Philo, they will start saying that, oh, all these Greeks, Plato, they read Moses and learned everything from Moses. It's a nice story, but no, they didn't actually. But we will get, I'll be talking specifically about these issues. But are we? Okay, see you next week, if I'm not fired.